Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Doing Business in Bentonville. My name is Andy Wilson, and I'm the executive leader, and I am so glad that you're joining me today. We're continuing our series with a phenomenal company called AIIR Consulting. This company, you have got to get to know this company, and you got to check them out at AIIRconsulting.com, because I will tell you, it's one of the finest companies I've ever worked with and representative on AIIR about the work they do around people development. And so my guest today is one of the high leading experts, Derek Lusk. Welcome to Doing Business in Bentonville.
Andy, thank you so much for having me. And thank you for mentioning, a few points about AIIR. At AIIR, we're, very concentrated on everything leadership in the talent management space. So we do leadership assessment, leadership development, coaching, succession planning. So we're helping, Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 companies do leadership better, essentially.
That is so wonderful. And what Jonathan, your founder, owner, has done with the team that he has surrounded himself with, and actually globally, it's a phenomenal company, and the work and the high-level work that you're doing. Now, Derek, you are the president of AIIR Analytics, and you're the head of executive assessment. Talk about your role. Tell us about your role there.
Yeah. So as you noted, Andy, I'm president of AIIR Analytics, and we have two different companies. One's AIIR Consulting, one's AIIR Analytics. I'm president of the analytics business, and essentially what we're doing is two main things. The first thing is we're doing scalable assessment, usually in the context of succession planning, but also for leadership development programs. And what we do there is we're able to do assessment and evaluate leaders throughout an entire organization, right? Instead of just, your top C-level executives or your SVPs, EVPs. Instead of that, or in addition to that, we're also doing scalable assessment. So we do this as part of leadership development programs, or we also do it when an organization wants to try to identify good leadership early in their career, maybe at, mid-level leadership, first-line supervisors. How do you spot and then develop, but how do you spot and identify the hidden gems, the good leaders in the organization in a very quantitative and data-driven way, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing we're doing is more high-touch executive-level assessment and succession planning. There we're working with, and a lot of my personal consulting work is at the C-level with CEOs and other C-suite executives, and maybe one or two levels down where, some of our projects we're evaluating, let's say SVPs in the organization, the CEO and the board are trying to identify, which one of these SVPs should be promoted or developed or groomed for EVP, right? So this is a higher touch assessment process where we're doing interviews, psychometrics, 360s, and we're building and making recommendations on who should they kind of groom for the C-level. The third thing we're doing over at AIIR Consulting is more on the development side. So at AIIR Consulting, we do everything development from coaching to, large scale leadership development programs where there's, 500 people being developed and they're going through workshops and coaching and so forth. And we also do a lot of work in teams. So we do executive team development, team building workshops, and that kind of thing as well. So we're essentially covering everything in talent management as it pertains to leadership on the identification, selection, promotion side with AIIR Analytics, and then also on the development side with AIIR Consulting.
That's so interesting. And I want to spend a bit more time because you talked about when you talked about the scalable succession planning. Mm-hmm. I really, let's go there for a moment and dig deeper just a bit into that. So when you look at, you mentioned both levels of succession planning, what type of skills are you looking for today in leaders? And maybe, the skill level in the higher level that you talked about, and then the skills that you talked about in succession as people coming in an organization that has still a lot of runway and with a lot of potential. So what are you looking for?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And the way I think of it is there are universals in leadership and there are relatives. So if you think of like universal relativism, I guess you could call it. So there are actual universals. Like you have to tell the truth when you're leading, right? In human relationships, you actually have to tell the truth. Integrity is always going to be number one, whether it's 100,000 years ago or 100,000 years in the future. I can promise you integrity is going to be number one always. So that's more of a universal. Then there's relatives. So relatives are, it's actually different leading in a construction organization versus a biotech company, right? It's different leading in marketing than it is in finance. To your point, it's different leading in executive leadership versus mid-level manager or first-line supervisor. These are all contextual variables to which leadership manifests, good leadership manifests a little bit differently, although still having the universals that I noted. So what we do is a process that we call leadership genome, and we build a success profile for either a leadership level, a region, a place around the world. Leading in the Western world is different than other parts of the world. And we build these success profiles so we know exactly what does it take to be a successful CFO at this company, or again, leadership level, or region, et cetera. So we build a success profile, and then we assess against or evaluate against that to identify good leadership in that way. To answer your question, though, there's a lot going on in the world. If you think about leadership today versus even 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it looks a lot different. I would make 2 or 3 points on this topic. The first one is, in general, the world is starting to decentralize a bit. If you think of, everything going on social media, fame is even decentralized, art's decentralized. There's cryptocurrency that is trying to decentralize the entire financial systems. Followers have more power than in the past. If you think about business and the Industrial Revolution, a lot different than today in terms of follower power. So you have this kind of movement towards decentralization, and I think that's to deal with complexity. So leaders today are leading in a very complex scenario where supply chains are wildly different. The grocery store had like 6,000 products in the 60s. Now it's like 60,000 products that are coming to the grocery store, right? That's a amazingly complex scenario. Mm-hmm. So a single person, this guy Leonard Reed wrote a book called I, Pencil. And the premise of the book is basically like a single leader, a CEO, a single person doesn't even know how a pencil is produced. Like you don't know the full process to produce a number 2 pencil. A single person doesn't know that. It takes an entire system to be able to produce those. So with decentralization, leading in complexity, my first point is leading in complexity requires an other-oriented style. So these are skills like listening, empathy, diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's a relationship-oriented, you could think of servant leadership would fall into this bucket, but it's a little more relationship-oriented versus the extreme opposite, right, would be like authoritarianism. I could talk about the history of the world and leadership over different time periods, but I can tell you the history of leadership has been not democratic. It's been, dictatorships, authoritarian leadership in the context of farming after the advent of agriculture. So leading into the future, it's other-oriented because of decentralization and complexity. So that's point 1. Point 2 is leaders need to give other people meaning and purpose. Meaning is at an all-time low in society. If you look at meaning in life and purpose surveys, it's not great. As a matter of fact, people ages between 16 and 29, 27% are in a actual existential crisis. So that means that's not like a little bit indifferent. That's like it affects me daily, 27%. So these people are in organizations, 27% of people. If you go to existential indifference, it's 50% of people. So that's half of people are having an existential challenge. Okay. I think that's related to decentralization and some other things too. But my second point is not only other oriented, but they really have to bring the vision. They have to bring the meaning and purpose. It's people are not, I promise you, everyone is not going to work just for a paycheck. They want a social cause. They want a social purpose. And Milton Friedman was wrong. Like the primary purpose of organizations is not profit maximization. I assure you, it's stakeholder capitalism. It's the environment. It's having a purpose and so forth. So I think I'll stop there. But those two, being other oriented, relationship driven in the context of decentralization, sort of related, is giving people that you lead a sense of purpose, meaning that they're significant, that they matter, that their work matters, that you're linking what they do every single day to the vision and mission of the company is extraordinarily important, especially moving into the future.
Mm. Those 3 points are excellent, and I think they're so well. You said them so well. I think people have to really stop here for a moment and rewind and listen carefully to what you just laid out, because what you laid out not only is today, but I think the future. It has so much to do in the future of leaders and how leaders need to lead and behave and have those conversations. So let's go back, because I think let's go even deeper a bit, because this is great groundwork that you just laid. Now let's go to you're in a company and you're doing succession, and you're talking to the CFO, a future CFO of a company, and it's a global company, because again, what you've laid out, it's a global view, in my opinion.
Yeah,
what you've laid out. So how would you work with this CFO? Not only does AIR identify this, you also work with these individuals. So talk about how you would then work with this potential future CFO of a global company.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, if you think of an individual in an organization that's trying to get better, or they're, maybe this person's career has been in finance and they're like, hey, how can I get to the CFO position? There's all of the background and experience components. If it's a public company, maybe they have to spend time in investor relations before the CFO. There's all of the background and experience points, but there's also the leadership style and more the psychology of leadership versus the resume. And to get at the psychology of leadership and really match kind of their style with what they're trying to do and what the organization is trying to do and the strategy and that kind of thing, we like starting with an assessment phase. So we want to understand the organization. We want to understand the role. As I noted, maybe we would have a success profile or what we call leadership genome for CFO at the company. And then we would assess the individual as well and say, hey, these are your leadership strengths. These are your areas of opportunity. These are your beliefs and values in comparison to the company. This is what you're going to care about. This is the type of culture that you're going to bring to the table. And, we would pinpoint, those areas of opportunity that they could work on via maybe it's coaching, maybe it's executive education programs, maybe it's a team development initiative to shore up some of those areas of opportunity. But we like to take a scientific approach that starts with, strategic self-awareness for the individual, so they can say, hey, I've always kind of known that this is my area of opportunity, but this is it more specifically, and what I can actually do, some steps that I can take to get better and sort of begin learning and developing myself toward that role.
Okay, so you're describing, the question is, are you describing your leadership framework a bit here? That's what you're describing, right? When you sit down and visit with this person.
Yeah, what we would do is we would assess against our leadership framework. So our framework has very specific leadership skills in the framework. And I can tell you a little bit about how we developed it. So first of all, everyone has a POV on leadership. Every leader, every consulting company, even in academia, they're all over the place in terms of what makes a good leadership. There's been what they called great man theories, which a long time ago, it's like this one thing to be a great leader, all the way up to behavior theories and situational models and so forth. But so everyone has a POV on leadership. What we did was take it from kind of an intellectual exercise and concepts to what are the actual skills that leaders need to be successful. So we did a research study and we looked at all of our coaching engagements and said, hey, from a very practical way, what are leaders working on? What are executive leaders working on in organizations to get better? What are their development goals that are very tangible? Like, I need to do stakeholder management better. I need to do influence better. I need to listen more. These are actual skills. Like, listening is a skill. You can practice and get better at listening. So what are they? What is the taxonomy of skills to be an effective leader in organizations? So we did that research study and we identified the skills, and we use that, to your point, we use that framework when we do the assessment on the front end. So we'll say, hey, these are the taxonomy of skills. What are the most important skills to be a CFO in the organization? Then we'll do the assessment. Where does this person fall in those skills? And then how can they improve on those specific skills and practice them and get feedback and practice? I also say deliberate practice is a very, very important point. So in psychology, well, even more broadly, to get better at anything, it's deliberate practice. It's not just practice. If you go outside and throw a baseball and think you're going to get better, you're actually not going to get better. You need to know how to throw a baseball. You need the fundamentals on how to throw a baseball, and you need to practice the technical way that's been proven that it's the good way to throw a baseball. And you need to practice that and get feedback and edit and modify over time. So you don't get better just practicing. It's actually deliberate practice.
Great point. So, all right, let's talk about this. So you're making wonderful points. I think I know our viewers are leaning in and listening because as we talk about that, I hope they're also looking at themselves. They're thinking about themselves. They're looking at themselves where they're, what are their strengths? What are their areas of opportunities? Because we're going to give them some information how to get a hold of AIIR Consulting and some of the people there at the end. But let's talk about the future for a moment. As you look at the future, talk about the leadership of the future. What are some of your thoughts that's going to change from what it is today? What's changing? What do you have to do? Especially if you're on the succession track and inside the organization, you've been identified with high potential. You are doing well. You have opportunity to take on more responsibility in the future.
Yeah.
So if someone is in that space, tell them or suggest to them what they have to do for the future.
Yes. So, it's a great question. What I would say is the first thing is the skills that are going to serve you moving into the future are very, again, kind of relationship oriented and visionary and people oriented. So historically, it's been okay to be an operator, to be an operational leader. Like, you're running a business, you're managing the business, and you're driving performance. In today's world, that's still required, by the way, but you actually have to have the versatility and flexibility to do the other side of the coin, which is more managing engagement, managing belongingness in the organization. Again, the servant leadership style of empathy, being other-oriented, take strategy in organizations. How's strategy done? It's not actually done with just the CEO and CFO now. It's actually collecting data points from all stakeholders inside and outside the organization. So if you think of stakeholder management, all of these skills that are very, very relationship oriented, you'll want to ramp those up. And then with my point on meaning and purpose, you'll want to kind of double click on how can I be a strategic, visionary that's able to have a mission, have a purpose, know where I want to go, know where I want the organization to go. Maybe it's just my area of purview, what I'm trying to do in my area of responsibility, have a vision, goals, mission, and so forth, and being able to align all of that together for people. And again, give them more of a meaning and purpose is 100% the future. Like if you even think 50, so my grandpa did not talk about meaning and purpose, by the way, at all. He worked at a steel mill. He went to work every day, and he took pride in this, by the way, but he worked 9 to 5 and he supported his family. He never once, if you asked him, is he getting meaning and purpose in his life or at work? He would think that you asked him like, why is water wet? You know, he would have just not understood what you were even talking about.
Right.
Followers in today's world have a lot of expectations. The world's more individualistic than before. The individual has more power. The sort of top-down management and leadership approach historically even that was proselytized in MBA schools is not going to work. It's just the world's changing. It's been changing for quite a while. So you still have to do a lot of those things, but you have to also pay attention to the other side of the coin, which again is more vision. It's meaning and purpose. It's bringing people together. It's stakeholder management. It's very relational in nature.
How does AIIR? Excellent comments. Thank you. This is so exciting. I could spend a lot of time with you and listen to you and learn because I'm enjoying this so much, and I know our viewers and listeners are. So let's think a bit. So you just shared the talent, the skills necessary for the future. How does AIIR help develop those individuals with those skills? What's your process there? Because now we're still working with this individual that has all this potential, and in this organization, what does AIIR do? How does AIIR come in beside this individual?
Yeah, it's I think at the individual level, I'll give you kind of the individual level, and then also maybe a cohort, and what from that angle. At the individual level, one of the most powerful ways to develop someone, especially if it's a very senior level executive, is individual coaching and group coaching, because they're very high touch. It's a very high touch experience versus sort of a programmatic developmental experience, which we absolutely do and love to do. But we like to fold coaching even into those programs, because you get, maybe there's a skill build portion of the journey where they're learning new skills. And maybe it's in a group setting, but trying those out, having a touch point with a coach, bouncing ideas off of a coach, learning from a coach and so forth is definitely one of the ways that we would do it. But one of the things that we really like to do is better understand the company and what it takes to succeed in the company, and what are they trying to develop in the organization to achieve the strategy. And also, what do individuals in the company tend to struggle with? So we like to do a lot of data analytics. So let's say we're doing an executive leader program. Let's say there's 60 individuals. We actually like to do an assessment on the front end, because it's good for the individuals to have self-awareness around what they could work on from a data-driven perspective. But after we evaluate or assess 60 people, we know what are the shared strengths and what are the shared areas of opportunity. So then you can really hone in on, this leadership development program is actually going to target these specific skills that are low in the organization. And then, oh, by the way, these are the skills that we need, to achieve the strategy. So we love data. We're very scientific at AIIR. So we like on the front end to be able to define some criteria, not only define the criteria via, like I noted, our leadership genome process of what does it take to be successful, but then evaluate people, whether it's one person or 60 people, against it and say, hey, this is what, from a data-driven perspective, we don't have the relationship side. We're all very, very hard chargers. So we're very low on listening. We're low on empathy. We get a lot done, but, we're disengaging people. I mean, there's some evidence for that. And then we'll send them through a journey that ramps up, those specific skills.
Wonderful. Okay. This has been so good, Derek. Now I want to ask you, we're going to move to another topic.
Okay.
And because this has been so good. And we just have to talk more later about all this. But now I want to talk about your book. And when I read the title of your book, I got extremely interested because I didn't expect it to be the title when I was reading that you're an author. And so the title of the book is Overcoming Bad Leadership in Organizations.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting title.
Yeah.
Talk about it. And then I wanted you to talk about your book, and then please share with all of our viewers and listeners how they can get a copy of this book.
Yeah.
Your book.
Yeah. Thanks so much for asking the question. One of the fundamental, if not the fundamental problem in organizational affairs is that charismatic people get to the top of organizations regardless of their ability to lead. So in a large bureaucratic organization, who becomes the CEO? Well, I could tell you the person probably doesn't have poor political skills. So if we don't use data, if we use intuition, if we use the current hierarchy that how the organization is set up, who gets to the top? And I think that, well, this is what research shows. It's charismatic extroverts that tend to be authoritarian are the folks that get naturally promoted via just intuition and not using data. So that's the fundamental problem. So if you don't use data, not only are they politicians, but Overcoming Bad Leadership talks about like overconfidence, right? Overconfident individuals getting to the top of organizations. They project confidence, they politic, they're very charismatic, they're talkative, they spend more time doing stakeholder management actually and politicking than spending time with the troops. There's actually a great study on this, by the way, by a guy named Fred Luthens. He followed around 487 managers, and he tracked where they spent their time and how fast they got promoted. And the interesting thing is they fell into two different buckets. Bucket one spent their time with their manager and politicking to those higher in the organization. Bucket two spent time with their teams. Bucket one got promoted a lot faster because they were politicking the whole time, but they weren't that great at leadership. Like they weren't getting results. If you surveyed the team, they didn't enjoy being on the team. They were disengaged. They were moving away from the team and so forth. Bucket number two, they had engaged teams. They were high performing, but the leader themselves didn't get promoted fast because they weren't spending time on those activities. So the idea is to be able to do both of those things. But what we see in organizations is the individuals that get promoted aren't necessarily the ones that are the best leaders. So the book is essentially about that, overcoming bad leadership. How do you overcome bad leadership? Well, I think it's assessment. I think it's, avoiding having a talent pool that's corroded with charismatic extroverts, essentially.
All right, it's great. Well, I can't wait. I'm going to read the book. I promise I will, because it sounds interesting. I think you're extremely talented, extremely interesting individual, and I can see why you have this really high level position at AIIR Consulting. As we wrap up, I hate to even wrap up with you. I don't, but I know I have to. Because I have so many more questions. And I hope our listeners and viewers message me and tell me they want you back on, and I think they will, so we can continue this conversation, or at least I'll have to persuade Johnson to get you back somehow. So anyway, as we wrap, and you think about the leaders, and to our viewers and our listeners today, what would you leave them with? Because you have literally done such an excellent job of laying out leadership today, and how you look at leadership and assess leadership, the talent inside the organization. What would you leave us with today?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, for the individual listener that maybe they're in talent management, maybe they're a leader. For the individual leader, I would say one of the most important things is to get feedback from your environment. A person's identity or the story that they tell themselves about themselves is consequential in a lot of ways because it does change effort, but in a lot of ways it's also made up. So it's very, very important to get feedback from the environment via 360, asking for feedback, really understanding, hey, how are you viewed in the organization? Because you might be the most creative visionary on the team, in the company, but if other people don't think it, then it's not reality in the organization, right? 360 feedback or getting feedback from the environment can be hard hitting, but it's the resilience, I guess. It's the courage to get that feedback that is going to make you better. So if you think of famous basketball players or other sports players, think of Kobe Bryant. If you think of, Michael Jordan, they took this very seriously. They actually analyzed their game. If you think about deliberate practice, they analyzed their game and they didn't only pay attention to their strengths. I can tell you that. They said, hey, I'm really, really good at this. I need to keep leveraging this. But, based on this data point, that data point, I need to work on X or Y. And they were pretty maniacal about it. So what I would say is there's identity, there's reputation. In organizations, reputation is vastly consequential. So it would be nice to know something about it.
Excellent advice. Excellent. Well, everyone, my guest today, Derek Lusk, president of AIIR Analytics and head of assessment at AIIR Consulting. Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful job, Derek. It's so great to have you.
Thanks so much.
You did such a great job. And everyone, thank you so much for listening and tuning in to Doing Business in Bentonville. You can check us out at our website, doingbusinessinbentonville.com. That's where all of our podcasts will be held. Plus you can there'll be articles about not only this topic, but we'll ask AIIR Consulting also to put some articles there about what they do. We would definitely have articles about their website, airconsulting.com. Derek, it's been such a pleasure to have you today. I wish you only the best, and I look forward to seeing you personally again at some point very soon. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Andy.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Have a blessed day. Thank you. Bye.